Blocking toxicity is not malice, it is self-protection. Healing begins when the word family stops being permission to hurt and becomes just a very well-defined boundary. Growing up in an environment where the people who should offer unconditional love are the same ones who cause emotional exhaustion is one of the loneliest experiences anyone can face. There is an enormous weight and silent guilt in loving these people. At the same time, getting butterflies in the stomach just thinking about Thanksgiving dinners, holiday gatherings, or even seeing their name glowing on the cell phone screen in a simple afternoon call. The culture around us often teaches that blood ties justify any sacrifice. But the truth is that no one needs to accept continuous disrespect as if it were an obligation. And the best news is that, to shield your mind, it is not necessary to start big arguments, try to prove your point of view, or pack your bags and flee to the other side of the country. True protection happens through a silent breaking of patterns. People with toxic behaviors feed on others' reactions. They seek drama, justification, and exhaustion to maintain control. When the posture changes subtly and non-reactively through small daily acts, the energy of the conflict is cut off. Without the fuel of emotional reaction, the family begins to perceive a strangeness in the air, noticing that the old provocation tactics have simply stopped working. And the first step to erecting this invisible and peaceful barrier begins by closing a very specific window in the routine. Imagine routine as a house with large glass windows facing the street. When the curtains are wide open, anyone passing on the sidewalk can observe the details of the living room, kitchen, and the most intimate areas. For well-intentioned visitors, this transparency is a welcoming invitation to enter and share moments. However, for family members with toxic behaviors, leaving these windows open is like handing over a detailed map of where the greatest vulnerabilities are. That is exactly why adopting an information diet becomes a silent measure of emotional survival. It is a strategic and extremely peaceful concealment. Living in an environment where every word can be twisted means that sharing dreams, fears, and achievements rarely results in genuine support. Most of the time, news about a promotion at work, final grades in college, or planning to cross state lines to finally live alone quickly turns into ammunition. A toxic family member often uses these fragments of life to weave criticisms disguised as concern, or to create heavy comparisons that drain the energy of someone who just wanted to share joy. Going on this information diet is, in practice, to stop providing the ingredients for the drama. Its daily application is simple. One starts to answer investigative questions with optimistic and vague generalities. Whether the subject is career, finances, or relationships, a polite "everything is going well," with a lot of work lately, but staying peaceful is enough. No deep details, no complaining about the stress of the week, no revealing how much is left to pay off the car loan. Real insecurities and the most precious victories are now kept and shared only with professionals or with that circle of loyal friends who make up the true chosen family. As the weeks pass, this more reserved posture dries up the source of judgments and gossip. The family environment perceives the change, notices a certain polite superficiality, and without any doors needing to be slammed, the power of interference over personal choices simply disappears. And when the lack of information begins to frustrate those who are used to criticizing and upending, it is essential to know exactly how to diffuse any attempt at direct provocation. When the supply of personal information is cut off, it is common for the other party to try to force an emotional reaction through more direct provocations. It is in this scenario that a brilliant and extremely liberating psychological concept comes into play, known as the gray rock method. The central idea of this technique is based on the principle that people with toxic traits, especially those with manipulative or narcissistic behaviors, feed on others' emotional energy. They seek conflict, tears, anger, or the exhausting attempt at justification, as all this serves as confirmation that they still possess power and control over the environment. But the dynamic changes completely when the decision is to break this expectation and become, on purpose, the most uninteresting target in the room. Imagine a common gray rock forgotten on the side of a highway or in the middle of a lawn. No one stops the car or wastes time observing a gray rock because it simply does not react, does not shine, and does not offer any kind of entertainment. Adopting this posture in family life means transforming responses to attacks into something absolutely neutral and monotonous. If during that traditionally barbecue or in the middle of Thanksgiving dinner an acidic criticism arises about career choices, physical appearance, or how salary dollars are being managed, the natural instinct would be to engage, argue, and try to defend oneself. However, by applying this method, the reaction becomes just a calm nod, accompanied by short and detached phrases, such as, "Oh, I see," "Yeah, maybe," or "just an interesting." The secret of this behavior is not to agree with the offense, but rather to remove any and all emotion from the voice and facial expression. It is a way of shielding the mind, letting the provocation float in the air without finding an emotional target to hit. Without the fuel of irritation, the person who tried to start the conflict cannot obtain the psychological reward they were seeking. Over time, the aggressor realizes that throwing indirect hints has become useless and loses interest, significantly reducing the episodes of friction. And if, in some situations, even these small neutral responses seem to require too much emotional effort, there is an even more silent strategy that does not require the use of any words, capable of returning all the weight and embarrassment directly to whoever created it. Imagine the classic scene: the living room sofa during the holidays, or a holiday barbecue on the 4th of July. Suddenly, a relative makes that passive-aggressive comment. That offense that comes perfectly disguised as well-intentioned advice about your weight, about how you choose to live your life, or about how you should be earning more dollars per hour at your age. The almost uncontrollable instinct at that moment is to defend yourself. Try to explain your perspective, or, what is very common, give that nervous little laugh to break the ice and prevent the family atmosphere from getting heavy. But there is a completely counterintuitive action that works as a perfect shield: strategic silence. The technique consists of simply not answering immediately. When the mean phrase is said, instead of reacting on automatic pilot, the most powerful choice is to hold the gaze of the person with a completely neutral and calm expression for 3 to 5 long seconds. In human social dynamics, intentional silence in the middle of a conversation generates profound discomfort. By taking this small pause, the environment seems to freeze for an instant. What happens in practice is that the embarrassment, which was designed to be yours, is immediately returned to whoever made the comment. This silence acts as a psychological mirror. Without your inflamed reaction to divert attention, the toxic phrase is left hovering in the air, forcing the family member themselves, and anyone else in the room, to hear the echo of what was just said and to deal with the weight of that rudeness. It is an elegantly firm way of demonstrating that that attitude crossed a line, without you needing to raise your voice a single time or start a drama. After those brief seconds, simply change the subject naturally or turn to the person next to you and strike up a casual conversation about the weather or the traffic on the highway, leaving the aggressor alone with their own inconvenience. And if, even with this awkward silence, that family member insists on continuing to speak and trying to get a reaction, there is a very ingenious way of using that person's own ego against them, redirecting the focus of the conversation almost imperceptibly. One of the most common characteristics in dysfunctional family environments, especially when there are very strong traits of narcissism, is the almost insatiable need these people have to be the center of attention. Often criticisms, judgments, and long stories about how, in their time, things were done in a much better and harder way serve only to feed their own ego and belittle those around them. Knowing exactly how this mechanism works, the best defense is not to try to prove your worth or justify your life choices, but rather to use this same need for attention to your advantage, applying what we can call the boomerang effect. This diversion tactic is as simple as it is efficient. When that relative starts preparing the ground for an argument, criticizing your lifestyle, the cost of your rent downtown, or the way you spend your money, do not engage and do not try to defend yourself. Instead, return the ball with extremely superficial politeness and ask a direct question about the person themselves. The goal is to shift the focus of the conversation so that their favorite subject, themselves, takes the center stage of the living room. In practice, the transition in the dialogue sounds very natural. If the indirect comment begins, just politely intercept the sentence with something like, before I forget, how was that trip you took to Florida last summer? Did you get to visit everything you wanted? Or wow, I just remembered, how is that backyard deck renovation going that you mentioned last holiday? This redirection blocks the toxicity immediately. The toxic family member becomes so distracted with the opportunity to talk about their own achievements, opinions, and projects that the initial attack is completely forgotten. It is a strategic and peaceful maneuver that keeps them busy, avoiding the exhaustion that a fight would fatally bring. But what about when the atmosphere gets so heavy and exhausting that not even strategic silence or changing the subject are enough to maintain your mental peace? In these moments, there is a polite and totally unquestionable way to physically remove yourself from the environment, drawing an invisible and very clear boundary without anyone being able to accuse you of running away. Sometimes, communication tactics are simply not enough, and the level of disrespect or negativity in a room, whether during Thanksgiving dessert or on a simple Sunday afternoon, reaches an unbearable point. It is at this exact moment that the golden rule of self-preservation comes in: the polite retreat. Many people who grow up in dysfunctional homes, the false belief that they need to sit and listen to insults or complaints until the end, as if they were hostages to that chair at the dining table. But establishing discrete physical boundaries is one of the most liberating ways to regain control of one's own peace, without creating the drama of slamming the front door or announcing out loud that you are leaving. The technique consists of always having everyday and absolutely unquestionable escape routes up your sleeve. When the conversation crosses the line of respect or the family member's tone of voice begins to rise, there is no need to announce that you are offended or try to correct the person. Simply stand up completely naturally and say something simple like, "Excuse me, I'm going to get a glass of ice water in the kitchen. I'm going to use the bathroom for a moment. Or I need to go to the porch to make a quick call." No one can argue with a basic need or a practical excuse. What happens in the psychological backstage of this action is very powerful and relieving. Without realizing it, you start to train that family member's brain. Every time the person becomes toxic, aggressive, or invasive, the gift that is your presence and your company is silently and immediately removed from that environment. With consistency, the person comes to understand that they will no longer have an audience for their attacks. And best of all, you protect yourself from emotional exhaustion. Gain a few minutes breathing fresh air in the backyard, and do not carry the weight of having started a big fight. And speaking of the emotional weight we carry, there is one last fundamental step for all these small strategies to truly work and bring lasting peace. It is necessary to reprogram the way the mind deals with that old societal pressure that family must always come first, no matter how much it costs your health. Growing up hearing the old phrase is thicker than water, or that the family must stay united around the table, no matter what happens, creates extremely heavy emotional baggage. Society, Hollywood movies, and even that perfect holiday culture sell the idea that family ties justify any level of sacrifice. But the great truth, and perhaps the most liberating of all, is that protecting your own mental health is not, and never will be, a lack of love, a betrayal, or an act of malice. It is purely and simply a matter of emotional survival. No one is obliged to accept continuous disrespect just because they share the same last name or the same family tree. Applying the information diet, becoming as uninteresting as a gray rock to not feed the drama, using strategic silence as a mirror, and mastering the art of polite withdrawal are gentle, yet very firm steps. They are silent attitudes that build a protective fence around your mind, allowing you to focus on your own well-being, your projects, most importantly, on that family you choose to build throughout life through loyal friendships. Real healing begins at the exact moment guilt is cast aside, and your energy is invested only in those who truly value your presence. And since breaking these old cycles requires a lot of courage, knowing that there are other people walking the same path makes all the difference in the world. Share down below in the comments which of these silent strategies you intend to try to apply at your next gathering or on your next family call. Reading everyone's experiences helps to create a true support network here on the channel and shows that no one needs to go through this process alone. Take very good care of yourself, protect your peace, and see you in the next video.